everybody. I'm back with another awesome interview. So I had the pleasure of speaking with Ana Buzzalino, who is teaching for us this week during World Quilt Show Online. And she's teaching 3 workshops. And as far as I can see, all is going well in those workshops. Ana is a fiber and mixed media artist. She's a designer, teacher, lecturer. She loves layers and texture that combine in so many ways and is put into her original work. She does monoprinting, hand painting, free motion stitching, hand stitching. She does it all. Her work has won numerous awards at international shows, and she is a frequent contributor to the Quilting Arts magazine and other magazines. She's currently living in Calgary, Alberta, and I really hope that you enjoy this interview. Hi, Ana. How are you today?
Hi, Diana. I am doing great.
Great. I'm so glad to have you here today to talk about your artwork and your classes that you're teaching this week. Where are you zooming from today?
I am in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, on a very warm day.
Oh, are you having another heat wave?
We are having a short heat wave, not as bad as the one a couple of weeks ago, but we are in the midst of another one.
Oh my gosh. So I guess everyone's staying indoors and hopefully next to their air conditioners.
We are trying to stay as cool as possible. Yes.
Yes. Oh my gosh. What's the normal temperatures for summer in Alberta?
It used to get to, if we got to 30 degrees, it was like, oh my God, what a summer. But in the last few years, temperatures have been rising. And as I said, we had 39 degrees a couple of weeks ago Celsius, and we are at 31, 32 for the next couple of days. So it's high.
Yeah. So makes for an uncomfortable summer. I know we're feeling it too.
You know, it's hard when it's day in and day out and it's so hot and you don't feel like going out. And so, but
you stay indoors and quilt, right?
We stay indoors and do stuff. So it's all good. Good excuse.
Well, I want to start by talking a little bit about your background. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from and how you grew up?
Sure. I was born in a small seaside resort called Necochea in the province of Buenos Aires in Argentina. And for the first 8 years of my life, we stayed there. My mom was very lonely because she was a new person in town. My dad was the general manager of a lumber mill. So she used to sew, and she sewed a lot. So early memories of my mom are by sitting while she sewed anything. She would cut a skirt after lunch because Dad came for lunch every day. And then a couple of days later, she would wear it for dinner. So I remember picking all the scraps and making ponchos for my teddy bears. So nice. And then when I was 8, the lumber mill moved to Buenos Aires, to the outskirts of the north side of Buenos Aires city. So we moved, and I ended up going to a private school where I learned English and French, and all kinds of crafts and different things. So I basically sewn all my life. In the early 1980s, I got married to an Argentine who was living here in Calgary, and made the big move early 1983. And I've been here sort of ever since.
Oh, wow. That is a big move. That's a lot of miles. Do you get back to Buenos Aires often? Probably not during COVID.
Not as often as I would like. But in the early 1990s, when my kids were really young, we moved back to Buenos Aires as expats, amazingly enough. And I was already quilting. I started quilting in the mid 1980s, quite by chance. And then while I was in Buenos Aires, I wasn't very thrilled about the move at first. Very young kids and different lifestyle. You know, you get used to being on your own, and all of a sudden you are surrounded by family again. So I decided to learn how to paint. And that's the one thing that I did, aside from I was teaching quilting at home to the expat community through the kids' school. And we ended up creating a huge group of ladies. Local ladies joined in time, and I'm still in touch with a couple of them. Really so nice. That's very cool.
Mm-hmm. So what drew you to the textile arts?
I've been surrounded by fabric all my life. My grandfather had a cashmere and woolens fabric. So they made manufacturing business when I was young. So whenever we went from Necochea to Buenos Aires for a visit, we would go visit my grandma and grandpa. And grandpa would take us to his office and the back room and give my mom free rein to shop. So she came out with all these wonderful pieces of wool, and I ended up with all the samples. So I think that my love of fabric was always there from a very, very, very early age. Mm-hmm. And then the quilting part of it came out just by chance, because I walked from work downtown Calgary to an area of town one lunch, and I saw what I thought was a blanket in a window. And I went into the store and asked the lady how much it was, because I loved it and I wanted to buy it. And the lady said, well, it's actually not for sale, but we will teach you how to make your own. And it was a quilting store.
Very cool.
So I signed up for the beginner's class right then and there and never looked back.
Can you tell us a little bit about your early quilting work to, what you're doing now?
As I mentioned, about 35-ish years ago, I was all traditional. We were using sewing machines, and I learned to machine quilt by machine. It wasn't done by hand as much. So most of my early work was all done by machine and quilted by me on the machine. Traditional, very, very traditional. But even like that, when I started, I would grab a pattern, and I always had that feeling that I had to make it a little bit different, and not just by using different fabrics, but by changing the pattern a little bit just to make it my own. And then, as I mentioned, in the early 1990s, we moved back to Argentina. We were supposed to be gone for 2 years, 2 to 3 years. And we ended up spending 9.5 years. So by the time I got back, it was early 2002, actually. And the quilting business had started to change. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were, artists were allowed to explore and experiment and mix and match and do different things, not just use fabric. Mm-hmm. So by then I had been painting in everything. I tried watercolors, oil, acrylic, anything I could get my hands on for about 7 years. And when I got back, I didn't want to lose it, but so I decided to see how I could start incorporating some of the painting techniques that I liked into my fabric work.
Right. How long have you been teaching that, the painting with the fabric?
About 20 years now.
Okay.
So, and then, develop new techniques, because I started to take different kinds of classes. I did a lot of reading, so some of the stuff that I do is self-taught. I experiment a lot. Some things are not too precious to me, so it's just a piece of fabric and a bit of paint. So if it doesn't work, well, off it goes by the wayside. So I do a lot of experimenting. Right now I dye my own fabric, dye, paint, monoprint, anything that will give me the results and the techniques that I want for my work. So, but that's basically where it all started.
Right. And so talking about monoprinting and the work that you are, doing as of now versus the traditional, we come to the workshops that you're teaching here this week at the World Quilt Show online. We have the monoprinting class working with layers, the paint sticks on fabric, as well as the pebbles and rocks and stones, oh my.
Yeah.
Tell us about those workshops and what the students are learning this week in those classes.
The monoprinting, once again, came about because of my desire to try different things, and jelly plates had just come out on the market at the time. So of course I bought one, made a whole whack of really, really horrible fabrics. Mm-hmm. But in time you sort of learn how much paint to apply, what to do and what not to do, the ins and outs of how the jelly plate works. So the class that I'm teaching in monoprinting in layers is something that came out of my love of intricate work and layering different techniques to make the work more interesting. So it's not just one layer of paint, but several. Sometimes some of my pieces may have 10, 12 layers of paint. It's not something you're going to wear because they are stiff.
Right.
12 layers of paint do change the hand of the fabric. But for my type of work, which is usually decorative or wall hangings, or they get mounted on birch boards, the technique works great. And it's so flexible, and there's so much you can achieve by learning a few tips and tricks, which is what I show in class, that you can take the technique a long way with a few hours of instruction.
I like the pairs, especially, just like the contrast of the colors that you're using with the different paints. So that is all painted on the fabric?
Yes, a layer at a time, basically, starting with a white piece of fabric, adding the first layer using masks and stencils, and then adding either masking one part of the image to change the background, or masking the background to change the pear part of the design, or a pear, a circle, a square, whatever the design might be. And so that would be the first couple of layers. And then it's just looking at the design and deciding what is it that you want to change. Do you not look at the if you don't like the color or don't like the texture, you can always do, other layers on and on, and small pieces. You don't have to work the entire background, by isolate certain areas that you want to change to achieve the effect that you want.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit more about the paint sticks on fabric and then the rocks and pebbles workshops. What will you learn in that?
The paint sticks on fabric, again, it's a technique class more than a project. They are going to learn lots of different ways to add paint sticks to a piece of fabric. So it could be, if you wanted to add a text, you can do that with a freezer paper stencil. If you have a piece of fabric and it's a boring piece of fabric, or you don't particularly like the color, you can change the color and the texture by adding texture and color with different paint sticks. You can also do layers once again by starting by laying grids and soft textures in the background, and then more pointed and definite designs on top. To make a standalone piece of fabric or something that you can cut up and include with your patchwork. Cool. They also will learn how to make their own rubbing plates, which is a lot of fun and very, very, very addictive. The Rocks, Pebbles, and Stones workshop came about because of my love of rocks. Ever since I was a small child, my dad used to say that it was impossible to go for a walk with me because I would stop every 2 steps, scoot down, and look at something. It could be a rock, an ant, a shell on the beach. So I've always ended up with my pockets full of stuff. And some of the stuff have been rocks. So it was natural that I would find a way to incorporate them in my work. So these are sort of 3D because they are made with, they have stuffing in them. They have a base and then batting to make them poofy. And then they are applied in 2 different ways. One of them is applied on the top and the other one is brought from under the background fabric. So you get really, really cool effects, and there's a myriad of ways in which you can incorporate these rocks into your work.
That's amazing. Well, all 3 of the workshops look really cool, and I know all of the students are going to have fun in your workshops this week.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about contributing to the Quilting Arts magazine, and you're also a needle pulling thread. You're a frequent contributor to these publications. What subject matter is like super hot right now?
There's always a lot of interest on something new, so, you know, or something that somebody's taken and moved a little bit further or done tweaked here and there to make it unique. And my work in the last few years has taken quite a bit of a different form. And so right now I'm working on a lot of layers by different methods, fabric collage, which is coming up, monoprinting, the layering effect, collaging, and a lot of hand stitching has come back into being. It wasn't that popular a long time ago, but it's come back into it. So I've written extensively on different techniques for adding hand stitching to your work, be it by running stitch, very simple stitches. You don't need to learn very complicated stitches to make it effective. I use basically 3, the running stitch, seed stitch, and a cross stitch, mostly in my work.
It does seem that you know, enhancing the quilts, it seems to be very big right now, what you're saying with the hand stitching, you know, anything to kind of enhance and embellish and kind of, as you put it, like adding the layers to it almost.
It's amazing how little you need to do to make a quilt just stand out by adding a few stitches. Even if you are a contemporary quilter or a modern quilter, and you're used to doing the matchstick quilting, I usually do that, but leave a wider gap every so often as a channel to add hand stitching. Right. And there's enough room in that gap to add either one line of running stitch every so often, or a line of cross stitching. For the Rocks, Pebbles, and Stones work that I do, I use a lot of French knots. So that's another of my go-to.
it also seems that, art quilting has, I mean, it's been popular for a very long time, but I think it has grown in popularity, over the past like several years. Why do you think that, artists like yourselves are drawn to the art quilts?
Um, speaking for myself, I think the allure of it is the freedom to be able to do anything I want on a piece of fabric and be accepted as an art piece. It's not so much that somebody will tell you, oh, you cannot do that, or you cannot glue a piece of paper, or you cannot glue a piece of, plastic on. Nowadays, just about anything you do, it's, well, some people may have preferences, but it's okay to try and experiment. And I think also technology has made it possible for artists to use different tools that maybe were not necessarily meant for fiber artists to use, but we can use them to add and enhance and work on images to be printed on fabric and quilted or thread painted, or for image transfer and collaging and doing all kinds of things. So I think the world is full of possibilities and we are just starting.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It is very exciting to be an artist right now.
Well, you had mentioned before about new projects and what you're working on now. Tell us, is there one quilt or one or two quilts in mind that that you've done that you're most excited about?
In the last few months, since about the beginning of the year, I started to veer a little bit in my work, and I started to use a lot of mixed media. So the one thing that I'm doing is I make fabric collage. So basically on a base of fabric, all kinds of little pieces of fabric in usually whites, little bits of painted fabric or decorated fabric that I have from other projects, lots of monoprinted little bits. So I make myself a base. I quilt it with using straight quilting very tightly, about every 1/8 of an inch. So it's really tightly quilted and quite stiff. But once again, they get mounted on birch boards, so they are rigid when they end up, and that gives me a base to add a lot of collage elements. So there's layers of collage and paint and writing and text, usually hidden in the layers, and a lot of image transfer goes on it as a last layer of work. So that's been keeping me occupied for the past few months, and
sounds like you've been very busy.
It's been a good journey to get to this point, because I'm still working with fabric, but in a different manner. So I have the fabric layer that I love, but I can also work with papers that I make, or with layers of paint, which I love the feel and the smell of paint. Paint sticks come into play, a lot of monoprinted pieces, a lot of painted pieces. So that's what's been occupying me lately.
That's awesome. Well, one last question is, what is one thing that most people don't know about you?
Probably that I am a very, very introvert. I'm a very introverted person. So I taught myself to present and be in front of a camera and be able to teach, because that's what I need to do. But when I am on my own and by myself in my own little cocoon, that's where I think I'm the happiest, because it's me, myself, and my thoughts. So I have to say that the pandemic gave me an excuse to be in my hermit mode and not have to see a lot of people if I didn't feel like it. So my kids laugh all the time because we had company the other day, and I tend to walk in the house and they say, "Come, mom, come." And I said, "No, I need a moment to myself. Too many people around, too many people around." So,
well, knowing that, thank you so much for joining us today. I greatly appreciate that that you came on and did the interview with me today, even though it is not your favorite thing to do. It's been such a great pleasure to talk to you and to learn a little bit more about you and your artwork.
this is wonderful. This is what I do, and I enjoy doing this. So as I said, I've learned to, to be able to do this all the time and be fine with it. I really want to thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today and share a little bit about my work and the workshops that I'm teaching at the World Quilt Show online, because I'm very, very excited about them. And yes, so thank you very much for the invitation and for having me on the show.
Thank you so much. You're very welcome as well. And take care. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
I hope you enjoyed that amazing interview that I had with Ana Buzzalino. She is such a great lady, and I'm so glad that I've gotten to know her over this past show. Coming up next, we have David at 3:45 with Bucklebee Bags and Joan Riddell. And then late night at 8 p.m., that's Eastern time, David Mancuso is coming back with Claire Victor, who is one of our, star quilters. She's entered in so many competitions for us and has won a lot of awards. So you don't want to miss that. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.